they asked me to do it, and I was anxious to do some live appearances. It'd been a long time since I've been on stage in front of anybody live. Well, I think the overall thing has improved. The overall sound's improved, I mean.
Elvis Presley was a man who changed music forever, but the story behind the legend was far more unpredictable than the image most people remember. To millions of fans, he was the perfect entertainer, a handsome superstar with an unforgettable voice, incredible stage presence, and the confidence of someone who seemed larger than life. But behind the carefully designed image of the king of rock and roll was a man who rarely followed rules. Elvis did not perform like other artists. He did not always stick to the script, follow a planned routine, or worry about looking perfect every second. Sometimes his biggest moments came when everything went wrong. A forgotten lyric, an unexpected joke, an emotional outburst, or a completely random decision could turn an ordinary performance into something nobody would ever forget. That unpredictable side of Elvis created some of the most famous stories of his career. He was a superstar who could make thousands of people scream with excitement, then surprise the same crowd by laughing uncontrollably in the middle of a serious song. One of the clearest examples happened during one of his Las Vegas performances in 1969. Elvis was performing "Are You Lonesome Tonight?", a song built around romance, emotion, and dramatic storytelling. Fans expected the usual powerful performance from the man who had become one of the biggest entertainers on the planet. But that night, Elvis noticed something in the audience that completely changed the direction of the performance. While looking toward the front rows, he spotted a man with a noticeable bald head. Instead of ignoring it and continuing the song, Elvis decided to take a chance. In the middle of the emotional ballad, he changed the lyrics and turned the serious moment into a personal joke aimed at the audience member. The crowd immediately reacted because everyone realized they were witnessing something completely unscripted. But the funniest part came when the fan decided to respond. The man removed his hairpiece and started waving it around, turning Elvis's small joke into a full comedy scene. That was enough to break the king. Elvis tried to continue singing, but he could not control himself. The serious expression disappeared, and he started laughing so hard that finishing the song became almost impossible. Every attempt to recover only made the situation funnier. The musicians continued playing, the audience laughed, and Elvis struggled through the performance while completely losing control of his emotions. The moment became even more memorable because his backup singers stayed completely professional. While Elvis was fighting to stop laughing, the sweet inspirations continued delivering powerful vocals with total seriousness. Their ability to maintain the song made the contrast even more hilarious. Instead of seeing the incident as a disaster, Elvis embraced it. He understood that these unexpected moments were part of what made live performances special. Years later, the recording was released officially and became known as the laughing version, proving that fans loved seeing the real person behind the superstar image. But Elvis's unpredictability was not only about humor. Another major part of his personality was his obsession with martial arts. During the later years of his career, Elvis became deeply fascinated with karate. What started as a personal interest turned into a major part of his identity. He trained seriously, studied different techniques, and eventually earned a respected black belt. For most performers, martial arts would remain something they practiced privately. Elvis had a different mindset. If something excited him, he wanted it to become part of his world, including his concerts. His live shows in the 1970s were unlike anything audiences had seen before. Elvis would move across the stage with incredible energy, combining music, drama, and martial arts movements into one performance. During songs like Suspicious Minds and Hound Dog, nobody knew exactly what would happen next. Elvis could suddenly stop the band, signal the musicians to pause, and begin performing karate moves right in front of thousands of fans. The musicians had to be ready for anything because Elvis often changed the flow of the show without warning. His concerts were not simply performances. They were unpredictable experiences where the audience became part of the moment. Sometimes Elvis even took control of the orchestra himself. He would grab the conductor's baton and dramatically lead the musicians, forcing them to follow his movements and energy. His intense physical style also pushed his famous stage outfits to their limits. The glamorous jumpsuits that became a symbol of Elvis's image were designed for appearance, but Elvis performed with such force that they often struggled to survive his movements. The same man who looked like a polished superstar could suddenly transform into an energetic martial artist performing moves that shocked everyone watching. That was the strange magic of Elvis Presley. He combined elegance and chaos, professionalism and spontaneity, all in the same performance. However, having no filter also meant Elvis sometimes went too far. In 1975, one concert revealed a much more uncomfortable side of his personality. During a performance in Virginia, Elvis interacted with his longtime backup singers, the Sweet Inspirations. What may have started as playful teasing quickly became a situation that caused real tension. Elvis made comments that offended some members of the group. The atmosphere changed immediately, and the humor that he expected did not have the reaction he wanted. Several singers decided to leave the stage during the performance because they were upset. The incident showed the complicated nature of Elvis himself. He could be incredibly generous and caring, but he could also be impulsive and unaware of how his words affected others. The next day, however, Elvis recognized that he had crossed a line. He apologized, and the relationship with the group was repaired. This pattern appeared throughout his career. Elvis often acted on emotion first and thought about the consequences later. That same attitude could be seen in the way he treated his musicians. During concerts, Elvis sometimes stopped songs in the middle, asked the band to restart sections, or pushed performers to repeat parts until he felt satisfied. To outsiders, it might have looked like criticism, but those close to him understood that Elvis treated the stage like a living creative space. He wanted energy, excitement, and authenticity rather than a perfectly controlled performance. His musicians knew that every night would be different because Elvis never wanted to feel like he was simply repeating a routine. And when the cameras turned toward him during interviews, he showed the same unpredictable personality. In 1972, before his famous Madison Square Garden concerts, Elvis appeared at a press conference in New York. Reporters expected carefully prepared answers from one of the most famous people in the world. Instead, they discovered that Elvis was not interested in giving ordinary celebrity responses. When asked about his famous jumpsuits, he refused to give a complicated explanation. Instead, he joked about them and turned the question into a light-hearted moment. When reporters asked about his famous hip movements that had shocked audiences early in his career, Elvis responded with humor rather than taking the question too seriously. But despite his playful nature, Elvis also knew when to avoid dangerous conversations. When journalists tried to push him into political debates, he calmly explained that he preferred to remain an entertainer and keep certain opinions private. That balance made him fascinating. Elvis could be completely unpredictable one moment and surprisingly careful the next. But the most unbelievable examples of his lack of filter were still ahead, moments when his generosity became almost impossible to believe, when his private world became increasingly strange, and when the same personality that made him a legend also contributed to the struggles that followed. Elvis Presley's unpredictable nature was not only seen in his performances and interviews. It also appeared in the way he treated the people who supported him. Unlike many celebrities who created distance between themselves and their fans, Elvis wanted a direct connection. He wanted to see their reactions, feel their emotions, and remind them that he was not just a superstar on a stage. That connection often led him to do things that shocked even the people closest to him. During concerts, Elvis became famous for giving away personal items without hesitation. If he noticed a fan who was deeply emotional, he might remove a valuable ring or necklace and give it away right in the middle of the performance. These were not cheap souvenirs. Many of the items were expensive pieces of jewelry worth thousands of dollars. But Elvis did not seem to think about the value in that moment. For him, the reaction on a fan's face mattered more than the money. He treated his possessions almost like tools for creating unforgettable memories. His famous taking care of business jewelry became one of the biggest examples of this habit. Elvis would keep special necklaces nearby during shows and hand them out whenever he felt inspired. To him, giving these gifts was a way of showing gratitude to the people who made his success possible. But this generosity was not limited to the stage. One of the most famous stories about Elvis's giving nature happened at a Cadillac dealership in Memphis. During the 1970s, Elvis walked into the showroom and ended up buying several luxury vehicles. While there, he noticed a woman admiring his custom car. Instead of simply accepting the compliment and walking away, Elvis approached her and asked if she liked the vehicle. When she said yes, Elvis surprised her by offering to buy her a Cadillac. For most people, that would have been an impossible gesture. But for Elvis Presley, moments like this became normal. His fame and fortune had created a world where a sudden impulse could instantly become reality. Even during performances, his generosity became part of the show. Elvis would use dozens of silk scarves during a single concert, wiping away sweat before throwing them into the crowd. Fans considered these scarves priceless because they carried a personal connection to the man they admired. However, Elvis's desire to connect with fans sometimes caused problems. He often ignored his own safety to get closer to the audience. When security guards tried to protect him from overly excited fans, Elvis would sometimes tell them to step away because he wanted people to reach him. He wanted that emotional connection, even when it placed him in risky situations. But once Elvis left the stage and returned to Graceland, his behavior became even more unusual. Inside his mansion, Elvis lived in a world completely different from ordinary life. He was surrounded by a close group of friends, employees, and bodyguards who became known as the Memphis Mafia. This inner circle handled many parts of Elvis's life and protected him from outside pressure. But over time, it also created an environment where very few people challenged his decisions. When someone becomes one of the most famous people on earth, surrounded by people who rarely say no, normal boundaries can disappear. For Elvis, that meant his private life often became as unpredictable as his performances. One famous example involved his strange reaction to television programs he disliked. According to stories from people around him, Elvis sometimes became so frustrated with what he was watching that he reacted in an extreme way. Instead of changing the channel, he reportedly used a firearm to destroy the television. One well-known story involved him shooting at a television while watching singer Robert Goulet perform. Whether it was anger, frustration, or simply an impulsive reaction, the story became one of the many examples of Elvis living by his own unusual rules. His late-night entertainment habits were just as extraordinary. If Elvis wanted excitement at 3 in the morning, he did not wait for normal business hours. He could arrange private amusement park visits, organize unusual games with friends, or turn his property into a playground. Golf carts were modified for racing. Friends competed in strange challenges. The ordinary limits that controlled most people's lives seemed almost meaningless in Elvis's world. But behind the excitement was also a growing sense of isolation. The same people who protected Elvis from the outside world also protected him from criticism. Over time, the superstar became surrounded by an environment where his choices were rarely questioned. Eventually, the consequences began appearing in public. By the mid-1970s, Elvis's health problems were becoming impossible to hide. Years of demanding performances, personal struggles, and dependence on prescription medications had changed him physically. Instead of allowing his management team to handle rumors quietly, Elvis often addressed them himself. During concerts, he sometimes stopped the music and spoke directly to the audience about the stories being written about him. One of the most intense moments happened during a Las Vegas performance in 1974. Elvis became frustrated with rumors about his condition and decided to defend himself from the stage. The audience expected music, but they witnessed something much more personal. A superstar openly expressing anger and frustration. Elvis rejected claims about his health and became emotional while discussing the way he felt people were judging him. It was another example of his personality. He did not hide behind carefully written statements. He said what he felt in the moment, even when thousands of people were watching. But perhaps the most unusual example of Elvis's impulsive personality came in December 1970, when he decided he wanted to meet President Richard Nixon. The story sounds almost impossible, but it truly happened. After becoming concerned about the direction of American culture and the growing drug problems of the era, Elvis decided he wanted to help. Without a scheduled meeting, he traveled to Washington, D.C., carrying his own ideas about how he could make a difference. During the flight, he wrote a long letter explaining his thoughts and offering his help to the government. When he arrived, he went to the White House and delivered the message. His goal was not just to meet the president. He wanted an official federal badge connected to drug enforcement. Elvis believed the badge would allow him to help fight drug problems and give him special authority while traveling. Eventually, the unexpected meeting happened. Elvis Presley sat inside the Oval Office with President Nixon, creating one of the most unusual moments in American political history. During their conversation, Elvis openly shared his opinions about the changing culture of the country. He criticized certain movements and even discussed famous musicians who represented the new generation. The photograph of Elvis meeting Nixon became legendary because it captured the many contradictions of his life. He was a symbol of rebellion and youth culture, yet he was also seeking approval from the government to fight against those same cultural changes. As the 1970s continued, however, the same lack of control that made Elvis fascinating began contributing to his decline. By 1977, the world could see that something had changed. The energetic performer who once dominated the stage was struggling physically. His appearance had changed, his movements had slowed, and his health problems were becoming visible during performances. Yet even during this difficult period, Elvis continued performing. During a television special in 1977, cameras captured a side of Elvis that could no longer be hidden. He struggled through parts of the performance and appeared vulnerable in front of millions of viewers. His final concert took place in Indianapolis in June 1977. He needed assistance during parts of the show and relied on lyric sheets for certain songs. For someone who once controlled every moment on stage, it was a heartbreaking transformation. But even then, one thing remained powerful: his voice. The talent that made Elvis Presley famous was still there. His ability to connect with an audience never completely disappeared. On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley died at his home in Graceland. The news shocked the entire world. Fans gathered outside his mansion, mourning the loss of a man who had changed music forever. The legacy of Elvis Presley remains complicated because he was never a simple story. He was a genius who changed entertainment, but he was also a human being with flaws. He was generous but reckless, confident but vulnerable, funny but unpredictable. He lived without the protection of a carefully controlled public image. He allowed the world to see the good moments, the strange moments, and even the painful moments. That is why decades later, people are still fascinated by Elvis Presley. He was not just the king of rock and roll. He was one of the most unpredictable personalities the world of entertainment has ever seen. He lived loudly, loved deeply, made unforgettable mistakes, and created moments that nobody else could have created. And that is exactly why Elvis Presley remains a legend.